Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Trish Caetano. I'm the Director of Drug Data Services and Analytics at Canada's Drug Agency. And this webinar will be recorded. And we've got a great turnout. So a lot of interest in what we're going to be explaining to you today. And with that, I'm just going to head right into it, if I can get the next slide. Thank you. So, of course, Canada's Drug Agency, of course, recognizes the traditional territories, rights, and diversity of all First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities across Canada. Indigenous peoples have been and continue to be excluded from and harmed by Canada's healthcare systems. In the spirit of reconciliation, we are committed to addressing these inequities alongside Indigenous communities. I'm grateful to be coming to you from Winnipeg, where I live and work. And Winnipeg is Treaty 1 territory and home of the Red River Métis. Several of my colleagues are in Ottawa and Toronto, and also grateful for the lands that we live and work on. Next slide. I've introduced myself already and also want you to familiarize yourselves with our team. Victoria Roman, our policy and program analyst, will be explaining to you shortly the application process. Claudia Sikorsky is our scientific advisor, and she'll be demonstrating to you some of the examples or hypothetical examples of evidence gaps that we think would be eligible or can be considered as examples in this process. Bridget Rowan Courier is our engagement officer, and she'll be assisting us with the question and answer period at the end. And Sinwan Bashadat, our program development officer, will be describing to you how this fits in to the initiatives and work that CDA does in general, within the rare disease landscape and within the national strategy for drugs for rare diseases. In disclosure, our organization, Canada's Drug Agency, is funded by contributions from the Canadian federal, provincial, and territorial ministries of health, but we also receive fees from the pharmaceutical industry for the way and for the service that we provide in conducting reimbursement reviews, including those for oncology drugs, non-oncology drugs, and plasma protein and related products through our interim process as well as through our medical devices process. We also receive funding or fees from pharmaceutical industry for the scientific advice service that we provide. Just in terms of housekeeping, these slides will be posted on our website, as will a recording of this webinar. Questions will be taken after the presentation. You can submit your question through the question chat process, I believe. And then after we complete the formal part of this presentation, we will be, or I will be answering as many of the questions as possible that have been received throughout the presentation. Questions that we are unable to get to or answer in the time allotted will be addressed in the bulletin process, which we'll talk about in a moment. The full details, of course, of this funding opportunity are on our website, and that can be found at the DRD website within Canada's Drug Agency overall. Okay, so very quickly, I'm just going to put some context to where Canada's Drug Agency fits in within the rare disease registries landscape and within the national strategy for drugs for rare diseases. You'll then hear the overview of the 25-26 funding opportunity. So who's eligible, how we are changing a little bit from how we conducted this last year. You'll hear about the components of the application and how to best structure your application. We have information about how we will evaluate and what those timelines will be, as well as the question and answer period. And again, just to set some context for you, um, the CDA has been involved in the National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Diseases, which is a federal a federal government initiative through Health Canada. We have received funding, and as part of the agreement that we have with Health Canada, we are focused on improving awareness about the landscape of rare disease registries. Over this past year, we've, as an example, published an inventory of rare disease registries that exist. As well, that registry will be a live registry with regular updates to it so that you can go and view which registries exist for which rare diseases and some general information about those registries, such as what information they contain about patients with particular rare diseases, how they're collected, and various pieces of sort of metadata about those databases or registries. We're also providing guidance about how rare disease registries can be improved. We've published a standards and guidelines document recently, and we really strongly encourage everybody to take a look at that. And of course, and what we're all here today to hear about is Canada's Drug Agency is investing in rare disease registries to enhance the capabilities for those registries to provide information to regulators, to provincial, territorial payers, to the reimbursement review, health technology assessment process, for the receipt of evidence that helps us make decisions about these very, very complex treatments in a very unique pharmaceutical domain. So with that, I think I'm just going to pass it over to Sinwan Basharat. Oh, I apologize. I have one more slide. Sorry. So since last year, I do want to highlight that in last year's funding opportunity, which is the first time we ever carried out such an opportunity, we successfully funded 18 rare disease registries. A listing of those registries are on our website also. We received last year, I believe, approximately 65 letters of intent. And from those 65, we were able to invite 36 registries to submit full proposals. And of those 36, 18 were successfully funded. We also know that since last year, since we had this inaugural funding, that all of the provinces and territories have now signed the bilateral agreements with the federal government regarding how they will use and receive funds in the rare disease space. And those bilateral agreements have guided some of how this funding opportunity was shaped for this year. And of course, since last year, we know that there's still been several new and emerging DRD for rare diseases. Many of those continue to have evidence uncertainties, and we would like to see that the evidence for those uncertainties is improved and that we can help and work together and collaborate on mechanisms to not acquire, but to improve that evidence for the purpose of regulatory decision making, as well as reimbursement reviews and health technology assessments. And with that, I will pass it over to Sinwan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trish. So firstly, I want to say we're really excited to launch this new funding opportunity. And today I'll have an opportunity to share more details about what that funding opportunity entails. That includes a broader overview of what we're aiming to do, as well as some of the details about some of the background that applicants will have to do in order to put together a high quality proposal. And I'll also be sharing some of the changes we've implemented this year as compared to last year. But before I do that, before I talk about the changes, I really want to emphasize that what remains consistent for Canada's Drug Agency is a commitment to continue to bolster and broaden that evidence landscape. We know at Canada's Drug Agency that there's immense potential within registries right now to produce high quality real world data that can provide rich insights and improve the regulatory and reimbursement landscape. So there's immense potential, and that's why we're committed to investing in registries. The aims that we're aiming to do for this year's funding remain consistent, as I shared. So we want to enhance the capabilities of registries to produce high quality data. We want to support registries and their capabilities to produce relevant data. So that's data that can help address questions and answer questions. And we want to equip registries so they have a framework to support decision making. We want them to be involved in that decision making process and to help answer those questions that are really being asked by decision makers. This year, we're pleased to share that the total amount of funding available for applicants, the overall pot, is $3 million. And you'll find that this year, as if you read the RFP, that there's a greater emphasis on applicants to align themselves with specific rare disease drugs or specific drug products. But you have to note that within that scope, we still have our independent processes that include the reimbursement review process. So for sponsored and non-sponsored drug products, so that this funding still remains independent of that. And if you want to be part of the regular review process, those channels still remain. They're still existing. Now, as I shared, we're actually building on from previous year's application. And so we really intently and carefully heard the feedback from a range of interested parties. And when we're designing and developing this year's funding, we carefully heard feedback from applicants, from patient organizations, from decision makers, and overall the wider evidence community in the rare disease space. So we took that feedback and seed and determined based on that what's within the scope of the national strategy and what changes we can implement. So the first major piece of feedback we heard was that there was a resounding theme that this is still an innovative funding opportunity. There's very few opportunities for registries, particularly, to receive funds that they can invest in themselves and bolster their capabilities. So with that in mind, our overall scope, as I mentioned, remains intact. We also so recognize that the landscape of rare disease registries is immensely diverse, based on drug products, based on the diseases, based on the development stages of registries. So we're still promoting an idea that there's no one size that fits all. We're not being prescriptive of what you can propose, but we want everyone to still have the chance and opportunity to bolster their capability. This year, also find that we've actually increased the funding amount that can be requested by any one particular registry. And that's really to foster that spirit of innovation. If you believe that your registry is capable to aim higher and to aim for something that's more ambitious, we're hoping that you can make that request in this year's application cycle. Some areas of improvement that we heard from feedback was that some applicants requested whether there's an opportunity to streamline and simplify the application process. So we've heard that feedback, and this year you'll find that, especially in the initial stages where you're expressing your interest, we've standardized the letter of intent stage. We've removed some of the guessing game and provide a really easy to use simplified form that you can find on our website that presents that first stage of application. Moreover, for the detailed proposal stage, we provided very specific guidance about the sections to include, the type of information that we're looking for, and we're hoping that you can provide as well, and that can help our evaluation. We've also included specific tables you'll find in the RFP that we're hoping you can submit. And eventually, for those selected applicants that are awarded funding contracts, those tables will help streamline the contracting procedure as well and hopefully minimize any delays in receiving funds. And finally, the last piece of theme that we heard was that applicants requested if we could clarify most or all of the requirements at the RFP launch, at the onset, and help reduce the need for having post-launch bulletins. So you'll find in this year's RFP that we've included a full evaluation criteria, including all of the domains, their weighting, and what type of information we're looking for. We've also provided transparency about how we'll be evaluating those applications and how we'll be prioritizing who has a greater chance of receiving funding, as well as detailing the total funding amount available. And as you'll hear from my colleague later on as well, we've provided specific timelines for when bulletins will be published. So have an opportunity, you won't have to guess when they're coming out, and you'll know exactly when to access the website and receive the latest updates. Now, getting more towards the details of the funding. The first question is, who is this funding for? That remains consistent. We want to emphasize that this funding is particularly for rare organizations working on rare diseases. So that can be defined by classification systems that are internationally recognized. For instance, a really common one is a National Organization for Rare Disorders in the United States. We're also willing to consider rare diseases that have been classified by the European Medicines Agency, as well as the FDA in the United States. Owing to the fact that we know there's no universal definition within the Canadian context, we're also willing to be flexible. As long as your organization can demonstrate that the disease that you're focused on has an unmet need, there's challenges in access to medicine or other barriers that are due to limited patient numbers. Well, as long as you can demonstrate that in the application, we'll be happy to consider that as a rare disease. We're also focusing on registries, so particularly active registries. So those are registries that have a capability either today or in the future of adding on new patients. It also includes organizations and registries that collect some level of observational data about the patients, about their diseases, about their conditions, and potentially treatments as well. And overall, we want organizations that can help answer questions, particularly for publicly funded healthcare systems. Now that's the overall eligibility criteria. The next key question is, what are we trying to aim for? What's the focus for this year's funding? And giving consideration that this work is funded through a directive from the National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Diseases, you find that this year we have a greater emphasis on targeting initiatives for fit-for-purpose initiatives. So those include, we want applicants to demonstrate that their initiatives align to specific unmet needs and uncertainties within the evidence landscape for particular drug products. We know drugs for rare diseases have unique evidence uncertainties, sometimes more so than non-rare diseases, often because clinical trials, they can run in a limited fashion. So there, even though a really robust trial is conducted, there can still remain uncertainties about the clinical effectiveness, the safety, the health system impact, implementation, or other domains. And what we're aiming to do is for your registry to help address some of those gaps. That's the power of real world evidence, to fill in those gaps that a limited trial can't answer. And we think this is the goal of this application is to help bolster those registries to play a part of that application, play a part in that regulatory cycle. And still noting the fact that recognize there's a huge unmet need, and the funding that we have is still limited. And because it's limited, we've developed an approach to help prioritize which drugs will have greater priority. And as you see in the application, we've developed 3 levels. These 3 levels correspond to the regulatory and reimbursement stage. Essentially, if you're a level 1, you're much closer to the later stages of the reimbursement stage. You have much clearer timelines that we can anticipate. And if a drug product is in a level 3, it's still important, and we know there's anticipated need, but it's a little bit more difficult to articulate exactly when that need will arise. So while you're preparing your application, there'll be 2 key steps you'll have to do. Some of the background homework you'll have to do. First thing you'll have to do is to determine where the specific drug product that you're interested in or poised to help improve, assess what level it falls within these categories. So level 1 consists of those rare disease drugs that have completed negotiations at the PCPA, or which is known as the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, since 2022. So the PCPA represents all Canadian provincial and territorial jurisdictions, as well as some federal agencies. And they represent one of the final stages between when a drug product is negotiated and can be listed by provincial and territorial drug plans. So if you go on their list, on their website, and you're able to access a very easy to use website, which declares what stage different drug products are at. So if that drug product is already has completed a negotiation, has received a letter of intent, that's classified as level 1. Now, level 2 represents those drugs that are in active negotiation or under consideration. These are specific classifications provided by PCPA. And the third level of drugs are those that they may not fall within level 1 and 2. Perhaps they're an older drug that has new evidence uncertainties that have come up, or perhaps it's a drug that's in a phase 3 trial that's just completed or was recently completed, or it could include drugs that we know are in other international markets, and we're really confident that they will be coming to Canada, but the timelines may be a little bit uncertain. And as again, all of these levels are important, but this is just a way to help prioritize which timelines are going to be more clear to assess and understand. So that's step 1 of your homework. The second step involves really understanding what those evidence uncertainties may be. And particularly for level 1 and level 2 drugs, we highly encourage you to look at published CDA reviews or NS reviews, reimbursement reviews that detail what are those evidence uncertainties, what are those gaps in the clinical safety, could be quality of life, could be implementation, or other domains that have been listed by those reimbursement reviews. That's a good starting point. That's a good foundation. We still encourage you. We know it's not exhaustive. There could be other evidence uncertainties within that's been identified within the clinical literature, which there's a power for a registry to help bolster. So this provides a general overview of what the application framework could look like. This is hypothetical. I would like next to turn it over to my colleague, Claudia Sikorsky, and she'll provide you more clear examples of how to actually go about this process.
Thanks. So over the next few slides, we'll be presenting examples illustrating how applicants can propose initiatives to align with specific anticipated decision-making needs. So these examples are based on uncertainties that have been identified from published CDA reimbursement reviews. So again, registries are highly encouraged to refer to those published reimbursement reviews when preparing their application, especially for identifying those evidence uncertainties and gaps. So it's really important that applicants make the link clear between how their proposed initiatives could support addressing those evidence uncertainties. And please note that the drugs that will be included in the following slides, they're for example purposes only. They are not a reflection of the specific drugs or associated registries that would be prioritized to receive funding. So the first example is a hypothetical example that is classified as a level 2 because it's an active negotiation at PCPA. And this is an example of an evidence uncertainty that's common for many DRDs. So there was, in this hypothetical example for the hypothetical review, there was uncertainty about the number of potential patients that might be eligible to receive the DRD. So the related decision-making question is, what is the anticipated number of patients in Canada who could benefit from this new DRD? Examples of initiatives that could help with this gap are improving registry coverage, improving data collection to identify eligible patients, improving some of the governance policies to enhance data sharing and patient identification, perhaps through looking at another data source that's not currently linked with the registry. The second example is an example of a level 1 DRD, so completed PCPA negotiations. This is an example of a product for von Hippel-Lindau disease, where the CDA review showed that there was a high proportion of patients that discontinued treatment based on the evidence package submitted for the review. And it was noted in the review that there's uncertainty about the discontinuation rate in clinical practice, as well as the characteristics that are associated with discontinuation. So the related decision-making question identified was, what is the number of patients that discontinue treatment? And what are some of the factors that are associated with patients discontinuing treatments? So examples of initiatives that could help support this question would be enhancing longitudinal treatment data collection. Could also mean improving data collection of patient characteristics, which could potentially involve reconsenting patients. The next example is an example of a level 3 DRD as the PCPA negotiations were completed in 2021. This is an example of Zolgensma for SMA. And the review did identify uncertainty about the number of patients who would be receiving therapies before treatment with Zolgensma, as well as patients who would be receiving other therapies for SMA after treatment with Zolgensma. So there was a need to understand what is the number of patients in Canada who received other therapies for SMA before treatment with Zolgensma, as well as after treatment with Zolgensma. Examples of initiatives that could help support this need would be enhancing the collection of longitudinal treatment data. Especially important would be, in this context, collecting data about start dates, end dates, adherence, event dates for discontinuation or switching, as well as reasons for discontinuation. The last example that I'll share is another level 1 DRD example. And this is an example for acute myeloid leukemia or myelodysplastic syndromes. And so in the CDA review, there was uncertainty about the impact of triosulfan on health-related quality of life in patients with AML or MDS, as this wasn't assessed in the package that was submitted to CDA at the time. So there is a need to understand what is the health-related quality of life in patients with AML or MDS treated with triosulfan. Examples of initiatives that could help with this question revolve around improving data collection related to patient-reported outcomes, and could also include engaging with patient partners to improve the completeness of that patient-reported outcome data. And as was mentioned by my colleague Sinwan, I want to recognize that not all uncertainties may be listed in the reimbursement review reports. So initiatives can also be targeted to uncertainties identified in subsequent trials or studies. However, the source should be made very clear in the application, in addition to the link between the uncertainty and the proposed initiatives. So I'll now hand it over to Victoria to discuss more about the RFP application process.
Thank you, Claudia. So I will walk you through the application components and the process. So this year's funding opportunity follows a two-stage application process similar to last year. And we're going to take a closer look at what's required at each stage. First, applicants will submit a letter of intent using the standardized template that we have provided on the website. And we introduced this template to help streamline the review process and to make sure that there's consistency across all submissions. And this will also help us with the evaluation stage of the LOIs. At this stage, no additional documents should be submitted, and you don't need to include a detailed budget yet. So the LOIs must include the basic information about the applicant and the registry, the list of relevant DRDs, including their levels, and associated evidence gaps that your proposal aims to address. And we are also requiring a high-level description of the proposed initiatives up to 300 words. And only applicants whose LOIs are accepted will be invited to submit a detailed proposal, which includes two parts, a technical and a financial component. In the technical proposal, applicants can use up to 2 pages to clearly describe the proposed initiatives to improve the registry. The focus should be on how these improvements will help the registry generate fit-for-purpose data that can support decision-making. And this information that we provide in the proposed initiative section should also be provided in a high-level summary table that should include the DRD name, indication, associated evidence uncertainties, the registry's current ability to address DRDs, and a summary of proposed initiatives. This will help us to evaluate your proposal in a more standardized manner. You should also include an your engagement and consultation approach, which shouldn't be more than half a page. You should also include risk and mitigation plans. So for example, what resources and operation support does your registry have to manage risks and dependencies, such as ethics applications, data sharing agreements, or hiring new staff that could affect the feasibility of completing your project by March 31st, 2026. And the proposal will also include a table of proposed deliverables and milestones. And this table may look familiar if you were funded last year, as it was included in last year's contract for progress reporting throughout the funding period. So this time we will ask you to submit this table, this kind of table with your proposal. This will outline 4 milestones throughout the funding period, and payments will be tied to progress on each one. And again, reminder that no milestone dates can extend beyond March 31st, 2026. And this table will be used as part of your final contract agreement, and it won't count toward the technical proposal's page limit, which is a total of 6 pages. The second component of your proposal will be a financial proposal. We will provide an Excel template for applicants who we invite to submit a full proposal, and you must provide your financials using this Excel template. We won't accept scanned copies or other document formats. The proposed budget must not exceed $300,000, so make sure that all your financials add up to that. And this year, we have increased this funding amount to give registries the flexibility to support meaningful patient engagement and include their input in their work, and also to invest in registry infrastructure and data collection processes, and to improve overall data quality and coverage of their data. And please refer to the RFP document for the detailed instructions on how to submit, how to complete these forms, and how to complete these tables that we require in each of the application stages. And again, please make sure that you use the templates provided at each stage of the application and follow the guidance in the RFP. And note that incomplete and modified templates may not be accepted. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how the proposals will be evaluated. So the food proposals will be reviewed by a multidisciplinary panel that includes experts in rare diseases, real-world evidence, research design methods, and also patient partners. The panel will score each application independently, and then we will also hold deliberative meetings where we will assess all the applications collectively. The proposals will be evaluated across 4 evaluation domains. And then as you prepare your submissions, these are the type of questions that you should consider for each one. So for strategic impact, does your proposal clearly address a specific evidence gap related to a drug for a rare disease? And how will the data you generate help inform regulatory HTA or payer decisions? Second is methodology. Is your approach well designed to generate decision-grade evidence? Are your methods appropriate, comprehensive, and aligned with best practices in real-world data generation? The third one is feasibility. Does your registry have the capacity, such as people, systems, infrastructure, in place to deliver your results on time by March 31st, 2026? And 4, risk mitigation. Have you identified potential risks that could impact the project? And more importantly, do you have a realistic plan in place to manage them? So strategic impact and methodology make up the bulk of the scoring, as it shows in the RFP document. Together, they account for more than half, 65% of the overall weighting. And the remaining 35% is based on feasibility, risk, and the competitiveness of the financial proposal, which is worth 10%. And it's also important to note that missing sections within the proposal could affect scoring across multiple domains. So we really encourage you to carefully read the entire RFP, especially the required sections and their page limits. Now I'm going to move on to the application timelines and the key dates to keep in mind. So the RFP was launched last week, March 26th. The LOI submission deadline is April 16. We will notify applicants by May 2nd if they are invited to the full proposal stage or not. Full proposals will have to be submitted by May 30th, and then we will notify of the results in early July. So please expect the projects to begin by July 2025. But of course, it also depends on the contract signing. And again, just as a reminder, that all funded work must be completed by March 31st, 2026. And then I just want to emphasize that this is a contractual deadline, not a grant, and this cannot be extended. Invoicing can be done after this date, but work has to be completed by March 31st, 2026. Now, we also, as Simon mentioned, we also have some specified dates for bulletins. But first of all, what are bulletins, in case you were not involved in the process last year? So instead of responding to individual questions directly, we will compile all questions and answers and publish them in bulletins. And this approach helps us make sure that everyone has access to the same information at the same time, and no applicant is at a disadvantage throughout this process. So this year, we made a few changes to how we are handling the bulletins. And the goal is to make sure that the process is more predictable and transparent for everyone. So the key change that made is that we have specific dates for bulletins. And so for the letter of intent stage, we have 2 bulletins planned. The first one will be published April 7. The second one will be published April 14. And at the detailed proposal stage, we have 3 bulletins planned for May 12th, 20th, and 26th. And then you can see that there's also deadlines to submit questions for the bulletins. So make sure that you keep to those deadlines. If you submit anything after those dates, unfortunately, we won't be able to respond to those questions. And now I would like to just talk about a few additional points for considerations. We would like to, again, emphasize that we are open to proposals from registries at any stage of development, but the most competitive proposals will be those that are working toward becoming fit for purpose, which means capable of supporting HTA regulatory review and payer decision-making, and that are clearly focused on addressing evidence gaps for specific DRDs. The strongest proposal will align closely with the objectives laid out in the RFP. And we also encourage applicants to consider and reflect on inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in their proposed engagement activities. And wherever relevant, registries may also identify whether the rare disease area they focus on is more prevalent in certain populations and how their initiative may help address barriers to equity or access. And again, just for the final time, I would like to make sure that you keep in mind that this is a contract-based opportunity, not a grant. And this means that there are clear deliverables and accountability for outcomes throughout this process. And then now we will open the floor to questions, and I'm handing this over to Bridget and Trish.
Trish, would you like me to start?
Yes, that's great.
All right, excellent. So thank you very much. So yeah, we have a number of questions, and I guess I'll just jump right in for the sake of time. So the number one question, or one of the questions we received was, is there funding available to establish a registry?
Yes, so we are not closing this off to registries that need to be established. I think what needs to be understood, though, is that there's a limited amount of funding, and the objectives of the registry need to be clearly stated and need to align with the objectives and mandate of this RFP opportunity. So, for example, if there's an identified need or uncertainty about a particular drug, and the proposal is to start a registry in order to collect data in order to support evidence to answer those uncertainties, of course, that's well within this this opportunity. But again, this is time limited funding. This is not a grant, so this is not long term. This is a short term project. Essentially, all projects have to be completed by March 31st. And part of the evaluation process is to examine and identify what the long-term sustainability of this work will be. So if it is to start a registry, there is nothing that would stop anybody here, and I would encourage you to again take a look at the application procedure. But again, it does have to align with a drug and uncertainties that have been identified.
Great, thank you. So there's two questions around the levels of funding, or the levels that have been described within the slide deck. So given the fact that registry's greatest values is in identifying therapies that are being used off-label effectively, can you clarify why level 1 and level 2 are being prioritized?
Sure. So fantastic question. So the priority levels of 1, 2, and 3 are not and do not reflect a judgment about the potential value of a registry, nor about the drug or sorry the off-label use. There's definitely a need for registry data that collects information about off-label use in order to demonstrate at some stage of the drug regulatory approval and payment system, or in the drug life cycle overall, that this off-label use has demonstrated potential and effectiveness for a new indication, as an example. the priority levels that we've created, again, they're designed to reflect how closely a proposal aligns with known and time-sensitive evidence uncertainties that we've identified through already existing regulatory HTA and payer processes in Canada. So it's more about the timeliness of what uncertainties exist and the drugs that are either currently in use or about to hit the Canadian market and be of benefit and might have some access issues. But again, in no way would I want to or should any registry feel that we're precluding funding for any important like real world insights in off-label use. Again, the levels are associated more with like timeliness of uncertainties. Again, levels 1 and 2 indicate therapies that are already in or near active reimbursement negotiations. And so those are areas that we're quite confident regulatory officials or payers already have established uncertainties that they're struggling with. And so level 3, they're still eligible. I want to make it clear. They're very, very much still eligible for funding, and they might be highly, highly competitive. If those level 3 DRD associated products or registries, if they offer, clear, timely, compelling ways of filling in the gaps, there's nothing to say that a level 3 would score highly and be highly competitive.
Great, thank you. And then a follow-up to that, what would you recommend to identify uncertainties for level 2 DRDs in active negotiation, but with no CDA or NS reviews that are available publicly yet? Is published literature the best source in that case?
Of course, definitely. But again, I think part of what makes some of these proposals more competitive or increases their ability to provide the evidence that's needed is demonstration that either collaboration with a payer, decision maker, regulatory agency, so understanding of what those needs are, and then understanding from possibly the patient perspective, where patients have heard, possibly from organizations or payers or groups about why products aren't getting into onto formularies or receiving positive reimbursements. So I don't think it's just limited to what's published on the CDA reimbursement review that gives you that indication of what the uncertainties are.
Great, thanks. If our registry includes several different rare diseases with some therapies that are unique to a particular disease, can we apply for funding with more than one targeted drug or disease?
Yes, and so we are very familiar with registries that capture information on several both several rare diseases as well as several treatments, either in existence or in the pipeline for a particular rare disease. So definitely we want to encourage those applications. The key, however, is to make it very clear the linkage between a product and a rare disease. And if there's several products and several rare diseases within that registry, and you're able to leverage funding to improve, collection of data across multiple diseases or multiple treatment opportunities, that's where the application will benefit and be more competitive. if you're able to just clearly demonstrate how you're leveraging this opportunity across multiple diseases and areas. Again, it's we've got limited funding, right? And so the total funding envelope for this opportunity is up to $3 million. We are not guaranteeing that we will use all 3 million for the submissions that we receive. If, for example, we don't receive a significant number of high quality or for applications that don't meet a lot of the criteria, we will reserve funding and probably do outreach if necessary. And these are other opportunities we have to explore.
Okay, great. In the situation of a do not list recommendation, is there an opportunity for a registry to apply for funding to address evidence gaps identified for a particular product? With the do not list, there were no negotiations that ended up taking place at PCPA.
Yes, absolutely. So a do not list, quite frankly, in many cases means that there is significant uncertainty. And the registry information could potentially be the evidence that's needed or uh, submit or generate evidence that's needed in order to move from a do not list to a list. And so if there's demonstrated awareness of what those uncertainties were in the reimbursement review and how the registry will be collecting information in order to build the evidence that's needed, then that's fully within the criteria here.
Great. So it's a number of questions we've had just kind of around some of the eligibility. So for registries that were successful in bidding last year, can they reapply this year?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is definitely open to anybody that was already funded last year. Again, new initiatives though, if there's a continuation of initiatives that were funded last year, again, your proposal must still demonstrate how it meets our targeted efforts here and the targeted initiatives that we're looking for. And it's back into the competition with all other submissions, but definitely eligible to reapply.
Excellent. And can registries apply if they're already receiving other federal funding?
Uh, so you need to make clear what the other federal funding is for. And we do outline that in the submission itself, I believe, that any other federal funding, particularly in the rare disease space. So, for example, the National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Diseases also had a funding opportunity, I believe it was just last year through the CIHR, and there were some opportunities funded through that. And I believe, there's some evidence collection, real world evidence or observational study type work or projects that were funded through that opportunity. That would be duplication of the effort in some cases. But if you feel that it's not, and you can demonstrate that with some rationale in your proposal, we are absolutely open to reviewing that.
Great. And can multiple registries apply as a group or consortium?
Yes, so I believe we had that situation last year as well. But again, it you need to demonstrate again, how you're leveraging this initiative through the limited funds that we are providing. And for example, if you're building one registry that can serve multiple evidentiary needs, that's fine. Likewise, if you're building a platform that allows maybe, clinicians of the same like the same specialty or subspecialty to capture information that's maybe common across some different rare disease groups. That's up to the applicant to demonstrate to us.
Great, thank you. And so we have had a few questions around international patients and international registries and whether or not they're applicable or able to apply for funding. And also, can the funding be spent outside of Canada? And if
No,
so,
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
thank you for that. Great question. So we absolutely understand that in the space of rare diseases, they're rare. And because of that, in order to collect enough evidence, sometimes to conduct the observational study to get the power, the statistical power needed in order to produce evidence that can be of high quality for scientific review and health technology assessment, you need to combine or collect information from more than just the rare disease population in Canada. We fully respect that. However, the aim of this initiative here is to bolster data about Canadians as well. And so it needs to, if you're going to apply with like a larger international group, first of all, the funds must be used here in Canada to a Canadian agency. We cannot provide funding to an outside of Canada agency, and it must be in regards to collection of data about Canadian patients. But if the data goes into a registry that is international in scope, that's fine.
Thank you. And I guess also around questions around funding new registries, there was a question on if one wants to establish a registry for conducting future clinical trials with no specific drug targeted at the time of this application. Is that within the mandate of this RFP?
I would I don't believe that would be within the mandate at this time. I would suggest, though, keeping an eye on the website. Again, in that situation, I think it would be very, very hard to identify, or if not impossible, to categorize level 1, 2, 3. If the uncertainties are still unknown about what the drug of interest is. That's not something that at this time we are able to fund with the limited funding available. I also, just through this question and answer, I really, really want to emphasize that we are funding the registries to collect information to improve the quality of that data that's collected, to improve and bolster the breadth of that information that's being collected. So whether it's the number of patients that you're able to capture, the number, including or improving or increasing the number of sites that are collecting data, or the number of variables for the data that's collected. This funding is not intended to fund observational studies or research. So we're not looking for the registry to conduct information. This is strictly about those foundational data needs. And then there's other mechanisms and other funding and grant opportunities that exist in order to conduct the studies that actually generate the relative risk or the cost effectiveness analysis. That is not what this funding is aimed to do. This is strictly on the data front.
Thank you for clarifying. One other question that has come up as well is, are recipients limited to academic applicants?
No, I don't think so at all. And so if you are a registry owner outside of an academic institution, there is nothing stopping you from applying. The eligibility here is really about, how is data collected? Is it being collected in an environment which can very well be outside of an academic institution? But we need to understand what the governance of that data is. There are some examples of like what is a registry, right? And so when we talk about these registries, we also need to understand that registries that we fund, we will eventually, for within the context of the national strategies for rare diseases, want to be able to work with registries in the future to ensure that we can access not the line level data, but to collaborate with or to have academics conduct the studies that are necessary that use that data in order to generate the evidence that's needed. So it can definitely be outside an academic institution, but it needs to be an organization that has the opportunity to eventually share information in a way that allows the evidence or data to be used for regulatory decision making.
Great, thank you. This is a little bit more maybe of a specific question, but considering that rare disease treatment involves various interventions other than pharmaceutical treatments, can rare disease registries on something like surgically correctable congenital malformations apply for this type of funding?
Ugh, that's a really tough one. I'm gonna say yes, in theory. But again, um, we are looking at a very specific regulatory and reimbursement pathway that these evidence uncertainties are contributing to, right? And so in that case, we're working with sort of known processes and known types of studies or outcomes, whether it's cost effectiveness, health system structures that are known in the drug world or domain that we are trying to focus on here. So I think, I'm open to chatting more with an applicant about a device or a technology. But I think that one, I'm not saying no. I just think that when it comes to how we're trying to prioritize funding, I don't see that would be um, timely. But if there's rationale that can be demonstrated, or if there's already a mechanism, like a procedural approval mechanism already underway for this technique and technology, then I'm open to talk. I think we're open to talking about it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And another point of clarity that came up, going back to the levels, was asked if, just to clarify, level 3 could potentially be funded under this initiative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Level 3 can be funded. Absolutely. But again, it's going to be very dependent on the number of applications that we receive. We may very well receive the large number of applications in level 3. And so we don't know yet what the application pool will look like. We don't know if, let's say, we receive a high proportion or a high number of level 1 and level 2, but they're sort of poor quality or maybe won't be able to generate sufficient evidence or high quality evidence. But we see that level 3 evidentiary needs are able to produce high quality evidence. There's absolutely probability of funding those, and I actually assume we'll see many like that.
Great, thank you. Well, in the interest of time, and I realize we may have a slide or two left for closing, I think we'll end the questions there, but we will have a recording of those questions as well to address after the webinar. So thank
And
you.
I do also want to remind everybody that questions do need to come in through a very structured process. whenever we receive a question, so as not to disadvantage any other applicant, we take the question and the answer and post it through our bulletin. So that's the mechanism, and we've posted the timelines for if you send us a question by a certain date, when you can expect that question to be posted on our bulletin so that you're aware of our answer in time for you to submit. Again, take a look at our website. All the links are available here for you. That's where we will be posting updates. I already talked about the bulletins. And this is a shot where you can point your phone and take a look at all the other work that CDA is up to, as well as any other information you need from Canada's Drug Agency. And with that, I will close today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending.